Subnautica is another really good example of what happens when that early access model actually works out. It's been in early access for as long as I can remember, and I know the last time I played it, it was a buggy, unoptimized and frustrating mess. But Unknown Worlds Entertainment have put the finishing touches on it, and it's finally fully released. And you know what, Sonny Jim? It's good. It's pretty damn good. But let's be honest though, we've had these kind of open world survival games done to death, and I'm not the biggest fan of them. In fact, most of them are just outright terrible. But Subnautica manages to do it a little bit differently, simply because of its theme taking place almost entirely underwater. And it also plays on a pretty common phobia of being stranded in the middle of the ocean. So the game opens with your character on board the Aurora, a spaceship belonging to the bureaucratic Altera Corporation, with the mission of building a phase gate on some distant planet before it's hit by some kind of energy blast and then crashes on the oceanic planet 4546b. Your character luckily escapes in one of the life pods and manages to survive, albeit stranded in the middle of the goddamn ocean. And this is when the game kicks off and the entire planet is then at your disposal. Straight away, you'll notice how Subnautica just really kind of shines in the way that it lets you march at the beat of your own drum. You just drop quite literally into the middle of the ocean with the bare essentials you need to survive, and then you just let off on your merry way to do whatever the hell you want. Last time I played this game, it ran like hot garbage, but it does seem to be a lot more stable. And thankfully too, because it's a pretty damn gorgeous looking game at times, with some amazing sound design and a catchy soundtrack to top it all off. Swimming around the surface, you'll see lush coral, you'll see cute little schools of fish and the rays of sunlight glistening through the water. It's almost kind of cathartic, combined with that fantastic sense of submersion that the game's managed to pull off due to the way your character moves about. The further you progress downward, however, light becomes a bit more scarce, the creatures you encounter turn into the stuff of nightmares, and your air supply has to be monitored at all times, but the rewards become higher with much more important resources able to be scavenged. Not everything in this game attacks you though, in fact most fauna are pretty disinterested in the player entirely. But there are some really aggressive creatures you'll come up against, which kind of makes sense considering you're invading their homes, and causing untold damage to the ecosystem. There is a story under all of this, but it's hidden in various PDAs and data terminals you're going to find scattered around the planet and the remnants of other sea bases you'll come across, all of which are wrecked and often surrounded by hostile creatures. And at one point too, you can get back onto the Aurora and repair its reactor to remove the radiation from the water. Overall though, I don't want to spoil anything, but I will just say that aliens get involved and then things start to get pretty intense. But even when I found out what I was supposed to do and had a good idea of where I had to go next, I still didn't want to. Just mulling around at my own pace was enjoyable enough. Regardless though, the ultimate goal of the game is to create a rocket to get yourself off the planet, but finding all of the components for this is going to literally take you 1500 meters deep into the planet's core, which alone requires some of the best equipment available in the game just to survive those conditions in the first place. In Subnautica, you're always going around collecting resources. It might be food or water just to stay alive, or other components like copper, nickel, lithium, lead, etc. Now it's how these survival games have always functioned, and it's something Subnautica doesn't do any differently. Compared to a lot of these other similar games though, the amount of items you need in crafting is a lot less grindy and it doesn't feel as tedious in that sense. You only ever need one or two of a particular item to craft something. You'll still spend a fair bit of time just hunting down those key items that you might need for the next big piece of equipment, but at least you don't need like 10 or 15 of something to make it. Not for the vast majority of things anyway. Pretty much every aspect of your character can be improved or modified. You can craft a dive suit that can resist radiation. There's a suit that can withstand extreme heat, and a suit that turns your body sweat into drinkable water. Yummy. There's different kind of fins to increase your swim speed. There's a knife for hunting small fish, a repair tool, a laser cutter, and various modes of transportation. From a sea glider through to the bigger crafts like the Seamoth, and eventually your own goddamn submarine. And yeah, controlling your submarine is as awesome as it sounds. There's also a really cool mech suit you get your hands on as well, called the Prawn Suit, which you can upgrade with torpedoes, grappling hooks, and a drill for mining deposits. This thing's also able to get pretty damn deep as well, up to 1900 meters, making it essential for completing the game. Aside from all that shit, there's just so much stuff to see and do. A real core mechanic of the game is searching all of the wrecked pieces of the Aurora that have been scattered across the ocean floor. And all of these will usually hold some kind of important new item or blueprint that you're going to want to get your hands on. I probably spent around 10 hours alone just mindlessly exploring the wrecks around the life pod. Then after that I started really getting into customizing my own sea base. And this is where the real OCD starts to kick in. I got to that point where I realized I was spending more time on the cosmetics of my habitat than the use it could serve me. Eventually though, I had the place fitted out with solar panels, a bioreactor, and a couple of moon pools where I could dock the prawn and the sea moth, not to mention my own personal quarters and a couple of windows to allow me to see outside. At one point I collected a bunch of resources, enough to build a second sea base, and then made another habitat right near the planet's core, so I had a sort of refueling or recharging station along the way. I even set up beacons at all of the different biomes in the game, so I knew exactly where everything was at a glance. So to say the game has a heap of customization is kind of an understatement. One of the game's biggest issues for me though is how luck kind of factors into progressing through the game. So from the outset you know how to make a few key items like air tanks and all that kind of stuff, but getting later into the game and making the better versions of those items in gear that are essential to being able to finish the game comes entirely from blueprints you find at random. You're either going to find them early on when you need them or end up searching around for hours. I got stuck at one point because to fabricate the next tier of equipment, I first had to find the blueprint fragments for a modification station, and then I spent what felt like hours just trying to find these by searching every single wreck I could find, before giving up and then just looking up where it was on the wiki page. Some of the items needed to craft endgame equipment are hidden in these alien bases, and the bases themselves being extremely hard to find. And I just don't see people coming across these by coincidence or luck. You're going to have to look up where they are. At the outset, Subnautica can feel incredibly tedious in a lot of ways too. Like upgrading the sea moth, for instance, you can only upgrade it through a vehicle upgrade console. Sounds simple? Well, you not only need to have found the blueprint for the vehicle upgrade console and the components needed to make it, you also then need to find the separate upgrade blueprints for the sea moth on top of that. Not to mention setting out to find the particular components required for each of those upgrades too. And good luck coming across all those things by yourself. After a while though, Subnautica does become a lot more enjoyable once you've got a few key items crafted. Your hydration level becomes trivial once you've created a water purification machine giving you unlimited salt and water bottles. You'll eventually create a knife that can both kill and cook small fish at the same time. And once you've got a pretty basic interior garden going, you'll probably never worry about food again either. The speed handicaps for some of your equipment is offset by using the sea glider, which ignores the player's weight and allows you to move faster at no cost. Air no longer becomes an issue once you've created the sea moth, as the energy lasts in that thing forever, and unless you're stupid enough to leave it parked near the bigger sea creatures, it's never going to get destroyed. Even worrying about small things like batteries or power cells for your equipment becomes a minor nuisance, because you can create charging stations and just cycle batteries in and out of the station as you need to. But that's kind of the point of these games though, is to get to that position where you've got a really good routine going with keeping your character and all your equipment functional, and it's a classic example of a game that people often refer to as being comfy. There are some things that kind of piss me off a little bit, like why is there only 5 hotkey slots for your equipment? Why not 10? I mean, it makes no sense to not have any more than 5. I mean, you have more than 5 items in your inventory, it just means you end up having to waste time opening your inventory and replacing a hotkey when you need something. Also, why is there no auto swim or auto drive button? Considering a lot of the time you're moving long distances, you have to keep your hand pressed down on the forward button for minutes at a time. And it just seems kind of silly to not have some kind of auto move or auto swim button. Another thing is that you can save your game manually, but you can't choose separate save slots. It just overwrites the last save file, which is kind of annoying if you want to make manual saves when you're doing something kind of risky. I feel like Subnautica not having a co-op mode is kind of a wasted opportunity as well. A lot of these survival games really thrive when playing with another person. The Forest is a good example that comes to mind. I think being able to explore some of the creepier areas would be really entertaining with a second player. Overall though, these things don't matter all that much when you're caught up in the act of just playing the game. There was a point when I probably spent around an hour or so, if not more, exploring areas around the planet's core where the heat was around 70 or 80 degrees Celsius, and the whole time I was just absolutely sweating bullets from the tension. Unsure if I'd ever find my way out, but when I finally got back to the surface and saw the sunlight again, I let out a sigh, like an actual sigh of relief. The kind of feeling this game evokes, be it happy or horrifying, is something you just don't see in games all that often. Be it coming across a new biome for the first time and marveling at the beauty of its flora, or screaming your balls off when you're attacked by some kind of new creature that you've never seen before. Common phrase I kept uttering when I was playing was, "What the hell was that noise?" Because there'd always be some kind of creepy screech or ambient noise coming from some unseen predator. And it excels at being both an enjoyable, relaxing exploration game and then something akin to horror, preying on the player's fear of darkness and deep dark water and nasty looking monsters. I was a bit apprehensive at first because all I knew about Subnautica was that it was another survival game that had been made popular by Let's Players. Let's Players basically being the Dane Cooks of video game content creators. But then I played it and it turned out to be one of those games where I start playing with the intent to play for 30 or 40 minutes and then the next thing I know, it's 1 AM in the morning. If you're not a fan of survival games, I think this one might win you over, and if you give it a chance and it sucks you in, it's the kind of game that's going to eat away at your spare time, causing you to forget to come up for air.
3, 2,